There's a type of person who hears the words party this weekend and immediately starts planning their excuse. Not a dramatic excuse, not a fake emergency, just something believable enough to buy them another evening at home. And here's the thing, they're not depressed. They're not struggling with social anxiety. They don't hate people. They just genuinely, honestly, deeply prefer being alone. And for the longest time, psychology had no idea what to do with them. For decades, these people were misunderstood, mislabeled, and quietly pathologized by a society that couldn't imagine why anyone would choose solitude over company. But recently, researchers finally asked the right question, and the answer is changing everything we thought we knew. Let me tell you something that might sound controversial at first. There is a difference between being lonely and being alone. One is a wound, the other might just be a superpower. And until very recently, almost nobody in psychology was making that distinction. Think about how we've been taught to view people who spend a lot of time by themselves. The loner, the introvert, the antisocial one. That last label especially. Like enjoying your own company meant you were one bad day away from becoming a villain origin story. We've been conditioned to see solitude as something suspicious, something that needs to be fixed or explained or apologized for. But what if we've had it backwards this entire time? In 2016, researchers at the University of Buffalo decided to ask a question that sounds obvious, but somehow nobody had really explored before. What if some people just prefer being alone? Not because they're scared of other people, not because they've been hurt too many times, not because they're damaged or broken or hiding from the world, but because solitude actually makes them feel good. Because being alone is where they feel most like themselves. They called this trait unsociability, and that word choice matters enormously. It's not antisocial. Antisocial implies hostility, aggression, a desire to harm or disrupt. It's not avoidant. Avoidant implies fear, anxiety, a painful withdrawal from connection. Unsociability is something different entirely. It's the calm, confident, emotionally neutral preference for your own company. No drama, no trauma, just a genuine orientation towards solitude. And here's where it gets interesting. When they actually studied these people, when they measured their well-being, their mental health, their life satisfaction, they found something that contradicted almost everything we'd been assuming. These people were doing fine. Better than fine, actually. They weren't lonely. They weren't depressed. They weren't struggling. They were thriving. That finding sent ripples through the psychological community because it challenged a fundamental assumption we'd been making for decades. The assumption that humans are inherently social creatures who need constant connection to be healthy. The assumption that anyone who doesn't want that connection must be broken somehow. But what if human beings are more varied than that? Let's talk about what's actually happening inside the brain of someone who genuinely enjoys being alone. Because this isn't just about personality or preference. There's actual neuroscience here. And once you understand it, everything starts to make sense. First, let's talk about dopamine. You've probably heard of it. It's often called the pleasure chemical, though that's a bit of an oversimplification. Dopamine is really about motivation, reward, and stimulation. Research has shown that people who prefer solitude often have what scientists call a more sensitive dopamine system. They reach optimal stimulation levels faster than other people. They need less external input to feel satisfied, engaged, fulfilled. Think of it like spice tolerance. You know how some people can eat the hottest peppers without flinching, while others tear up at a hint of black pepper? It's the same principle with dopamine sensitivity. An extrovert might need the whole jalapeno to feel anything. The social buzz, the energy exchange, the constant stimulation of being around people. That's what it takes for their brain to hit that sweet spot of optimal arousal. But a person who loves solitude, one flake of red pepper and they're good for the day. A quiet morning with coffee and a book, a solo walk through the neighborhood, an evening of uninterrupted thinking. That's enough. That's plenty. That's actually perfect. Their brain isn't understimulated, it's appropriately stimulated. The difference is in the threshold, not the capacity for pleasure. But dopamine sensitivity is only part of the story. Let's talk about the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of your brain right behind your forehead, responsible for some of the most sophisticated cognitive functions humans possess. Deep thinking, self-reflection, complex problem solving, abstract reasoning, long-term planning, the ability to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously. Studies using brain imaging technology have found something intriguing about people who enjoy solitude. When they're alone, their prefrontal cortex shows heightened activity. They're not just sitting there staring at walls, even though it might look that way from the outside. Internally, their brains are throwing an absolute party. Introspection is happening. Creativity is flowing. Mental processing that requires quiet and space is unfolding in ways that simply can't happen when you're constantly interrupted by external stimulation. This is why so many people who love solitude report that their best ideas come when they're alone. It's not a coincidence, it's neuroscience. And speaking of ideas, let's look at the research on creativity. Study after study has shown that breakthrough insights rarely happen in brainstorming sessions. They rarely happen in crowded coffee shops or busy offices. They happen in the shower, on solo walks, at 2 a.m. when you're the only person awake. They happen in moments of quiet, unstructured solitude, when the brain has space to make unexpected connections. Einstein famously did his best work alone. He called it combinatorial play, this process of letting his mind wander through ideas without external pressure or interruption. Newton developed calculus and his theory of gravity during the plague years when he was isolated from society. Virginia Woolf wrote an entire essay called A Room of One's Own, about the necessity of solitude for creative work. She argued that having space, both physical and mental, was essential for any serious thinking or creating. Maya Angelou would rent hotel rooms just to write in. She had a perfectly good house, but she needed that separation, that intentional solitude, to access her deepest creative work. These aren't anomalies, they're patterns. Some of the most creative, innovative, profound thinkers in human history have been people who sought out and protected their solitude. Not because they couldn't handle social interaction. Many of them were perfectly charming in company, but because they understood something that our constantly connected society has forgotten. Some forms of thinking require silence. Some forms of insight require solitude. Some of the most important work we can do happens when we're alone with our own minds. Now, before you start nodding along and claiming this label for yourself, and I know at least half of you are already thinking, this is totally me, we need to pump the brakes for a second, because there's a crucial distinction here that we can't skip over. It would be irresponsible to talk about the psychology of solitude without addressing it. The distinction is this: do you choose solitude, or are you hiding in it? Because here's the uncomfortable truth that we need to sit with. Some people aren't really embracing solitude. They're using it as armor, as a shield, as protection against rejection, judgment, vulnerability, or the pain that can come with genuine connection. And those are very different things. The psychologist Abraham Maslow talked about this extensively. He drew a clear line between what he called healthy solitude and unhealthy withdrawal. Healthy solitude, he said, comes from a place of abundance, not scarcity. You enjoy being alone because you've had meaningful connections, and you know you can have them again whenever you want. You're not running from people. You're running toward yourself. The solitude is restorative, not defensive. It replenishes you rather than hiding you. Unhealthy withdrawal looks similar from the outside, but the internal experience is completely different. It's driven by fear rather than preference. It's about avoiding pain rather than seeking peace. It's isolation wearing the costume of solitude. So, how do you know which one you're experiencing? Here's a question worth asking yourself. Why do you like being alone? If your answer involves words like recharge, create, think, process, restore, you're probably in that healthy unsociability zone. Solitude is a choice you make because it genuinely serves you. It's where you do your best thinking, your deepest processing, your most authentic existing. But if your answer involves words like safer, easier, less painful, you can't hurt me here, then that might be something else. That might be worth exploring with someone you trust. Not because there's anything wrong with you, but because hiding isn't the same as resting, and protection isn't the same as peace. There's a difference between choosing solitude and being exiled to it by your own fears. But let's get back to the people who genuinely thrive in solitude, the ones for whom being alone isn't a defensive strategy, but a genuine preference. Because they've figured out something that the rest of us are still learning. They've discovered that being alone isn't the same as being incomplete. Think about how we talk about relationships in our culture. My other half, my better half, you complete me. We've built this entire romantic narrative around the idea that humans are like broken Lego pieces, wandering around desperately searching for our matching brick, as if we're born with something missing, and the whole point of life is to find the person who fills that gap. But people who genuinely enjoy solitude have looked at that narrative, examined it carefully, and said, actually, I'm a whole set already. I'm not missing a piece. I'm not searching for someone to complete me. I already feel complete. And connection, when I choose it, is about adding to something that's already whole, not filling a void. And here's what's important to understand. This isn't arrogance. It's not some defensive superiority complex. It's self-awareness. These people have spent enough time in their own company to know who they are, what they value, what they need, and what they don't. Research from Dr. Bella DiPaolo at UC Santa Barbara actually found something counterintuitive about this. Single people who embrace solitude, who are comfortable and happy being alone, often have stronger connections with friends, family, and community than their coupled counterparts who hate being alone. Why? Because they're not trying to get all their emotional needs met by one person. They're not clinging. They're not demanding. They're choosing their connections freely, from a place of fullness rather than emptiness. And that changes everything about the quality of those connections. Think about the difference between someone who texts you because they genuinely want to connect versus someone who texts you because they can't stand being alone with themselves. You can feel the difference, can't you? One is an invitation. The other is a demand wearing the mask of an invitation. People who are comfortable with solitude bring a different energy to their relationships. They're present because they chose to be present. And that choice makes all the difference. Here's something else. The quality of your alone time directly impacts the quality of your social time. This is huge. When you're recharged, centered, clear-headed from solitude, you actually show up better in relationships. You listen more carefully. You respond more thoughtfully. You have more to give. You're not showing up empty, hoping someone will fill you. You're showing up full, ready to share. In Japan, there's a concept called hitori. It roughly translates to alone time, but it's more than just a description. It's a valued cultural practice. Something to be sought out and protected, not avoided or apologized for. In Japan, you can find restaurants with solo seating booths, not as a last resort for lonely people, but as a design feature. Movie theaters have single seats that don't make you feel like the odd one out. Solo karaoke booths are worth billions of yen. They've made being alone a legitimate social activity, not a sad backup plan, an actual, respected, normal thing. Meanwhile, in much of the Western world, we're still asking people, "Why are you eating alone?" like it's a confession at a support group. We're still treating a table for one as something that needs to be explained. We live in an age of constant connectivity. You're expected to respond immediately, to always be available. Your phone buzzes constantly. For people who are wired for solitude, this is exhausting in a way that's hard to articulate. Every moment of potential alone time gets filled with pings and notifications and the implicit expectation that you'll respond. There's no natural space anymore for just being alone with your thoughts. If you're someone who thrives in solitude, you've probably felt this pressure your whole life. The subtle and not so subtle messages that something is wrong with you. The concern from well-meaning friends and family who can't understand why you'd choose to be alone when you could be with people. Here's what I want you to understand. There's nothing wrong with you. Your brain is wired differently, not wrongly. The same neuroscience that makes social butterflies crave company makes you crave solitude. Neither is superior. Neither is broken. They're different strategies for achieving the same thing. Optimal nervous system regulation. Authentic well-being. Being the fullest version of yourself. The world needs both kinds of people. It needs the connectors and the contemplators. The ones who build community and the ones who build insight. The extroverts who energize groups and the solitude seekers who do the deep thinking that moves ideas forward. Humanity has always had both, and we've always needed both. If you're someone who genuinely loves being alone, here's your permission slip. Not that you need permission, but sometimes it helps to hear it. You're not weird, you're not broken, you're not missing out on some fundamental human experience. Your brain is literally wired to find restoration in alone time. And that's not just okay, it's valuable. In our age of constant connectivity, the ability to genuinely enjoy your own company might be the most countercultural thing you can do. But make sure you're not confusing preference with protection. Check in with yourself honestly. Can you connect when you want to? Do you have people you trust, people you could reach out to if you needed? Are you running toward solitude or from connection? Because the healthiest relationship with being alone is one where it's a choice, not a defense. There's something beautiful about people who have examined their relationship with solitude honestly and found it to be genuine. They have a kind of groundedness that's hard to fake. They're not performing contentment. They've found something inside themselves that doesn't depend on external circumstances. And that independence gives them a quiet strength. Here's the paradox worth sitting with. The people who are most comfortable being alone are often the ones who are best at connecting with others when they choose to. Because they're not bringing neediness to the interaction. They show up whole, present, and genuinely interested in the other person, not as someone to fill a void. The guilt that solitude lovers often carry, that quiet, persistent sense that you should want to be more social, that your preference for alone time is somehow a moral failing. If you've ever felt this guilt, hear this clearly. You haven't done anything wrong by being who you are. The guilt you feel is cultural conditioning, not cosmic truth. There's something quietly revolutionary about being okay by yourself. In a world that constantly tells you that you need more, need to be connected more, engaged more, social more, the person who can sit alone in silence and feel genuinely content is doing something radical. They've escaped a particular kind of prison that many people don't even know they're in. The next time someone asks you why you're always alone, or why you canceled those plans, or why you'd rather stay home with a book than go to that party, you have options. You could tell them about dopamine sensitivity and prefrontal cortex activation. You could reference the research from the University of Buffalo on unsociability. You could talk about Hitori and how entire cultures honor solitude. Or you could just smile and say, "Because I like myself." That usually ends the conversation pretty quickly. People who genuinely enjoy solitude have developed something precious, a relationship with themselves that doesn't depend on external validation, an internal world that's rich enough to be genuinely satisfying, a sense of wholeness that comes from within rather than being borrowed from others. That's not antisocial. That's not avoidant. That's not broken. That's actually a kind of psychological wealth that many people never develop because they're too busy looking outside themselves for what can only be found within. If this describes you, own it. Protect your solitude. Make time for it. Trust that your need for alone time is legitimate and valuable. You're not failing at being human by preferring solitude. You're succeeding at being yourself. You're not broken. You're wired for depth. You're not antisocial. You're selectively social. You're not avoiding life. You're living it on your own terms. And in a world that never stops demanding your attention, that might be exactly what we need more of.